Howdy y'all, I am Ice Gold, and today I just wanted to circle back and cover a topic that I covered a little over a year ago. It's a little crazy to say that. I've been, back for a year, but this topic is something that we saw the devs give a little bit of thought to, but then we never really saw them think about it much again, and that is the topic of mount stitching. And the idea that I had for it was it involved adding a new kind of jewel socket and, putting those on just every single mount in the game. Or maybe not every single mount. There could, I'm sure, still be some that take none, like no jewel socket, but some of the more, I guess, like hard to acquire mounts. It's like, think about things like the Aquila mounts, or like these cast symbols. Although maybe not the cast symbols, considering they're already from a pack, but you get the idea. It's like mounts that you can craft or get for free. It's like those are the types of mounts that should have like jewel sockets, and I'm sure pack mounts could have it too, but these jewel sockets, and I gave them heart shapes because, why not? It's like we've already got like what, square, triangle, circle, tier, and star, and then of course we've got the pin system as we do. So adding a heart socket, don't think that would be too hard. Don't think it would be too terribly hard, but you get the general idea. I think that it's like that would be, it's a good thing that I think they should add. And just circling back to it, figured I'd talk about it again, because in this day and age, we are sort of living in this limbo where every single best setup, no matter what you're doing for PvE or PvP, a stat boosting mount will round out the set perfectly. And I'm talking about things like, death PvP setup. It's like this, with this setup, I've got max damage, pretty good resist, perfect accuracy to death, and then some pretty good crit, block, and perfect pierce, as well as perfect pips and pretty solid shads with some, not so great pip conversion, but whatever. But if I want to use fire spells, which, death works with really, really well, given that, death does not really do too well against shields, so naturally a death would want to dual school into fire in order to, I guess, work with that. But fire spells take 25 accuracy, and this build only has 24. So, seeing as I already have perfect stats everywhere else, that is where the Crystal Unicorn comes in. And when I have this equipped, I don't fizzle fire spells. And I think that's pretty good. It is the best mount for this particular setup, because I can't fizzle fire spells, obviously can't fizzle death spells, still have perfect damage, pretty high resist, and there's no way to get more resist with the mount, and there shouldn't be. And then I've also got perfect pips, and then pretty good shads. So with that in mind, stat mounts are a big part of the game now. It's like there were bundles that dropped for a while. There's the whole Gulcher's Horde pack. I would be a little surprised if this pack that came out in early 2017 has not been the best selling and highest grossing pack in the game's history. And that's beating out things like Horde of the Hydra and all of those popular packs way back in the day, back when the game was much more alive for like the cool looking mounts, before stat mounts even mattered. But when they added the Gulcher's Horde pack, that was when things sort of started to get a little dicey. It's like giving mounts stats. Like, mounts are, for the longest time, mounts were the only piece of gear in the game that didn't give stats. And then I don't remember if the Gulchers were the very first. I know that the Mammoth Mini dropped, and I say dropped in the past tense because at some point in the past year they removed it, but it used to drop from Warlord Minac in the Jeweled Slopes at Polaris. And that might have been the first one over the Gulchers, but it gave 2% outgoing healing, which did not really matter too much. But once they started adding damage to the mounts, that was when that whole can of worms got opened, and we started seeing just everybody going for them. It's like, before it didn't really matter. You could have, like, I don't know, the Clockwork Courser, and that might give you some extra pierce, or the Vulpine Avenger to get the same amount, or the Waddling Witch Hut from the Polaris pack, or whatever that ended up being way back in the day, to get some extra pip chance. But ultimately, those Gulchers were the big deal, and that was what everybody wanted to go for the longest time. And from 2017 to about 2020, they were the meta mount. And then cut to 2020, and the Primeval Horde pack drops, and then we get the Frillasaur and Bronto set bonus, which, for those unaware, no matter what school you are, you can use one of them, one of the set bonuses, to get a minimum of 5 extra damage if you have a Frillasaur for your school and the corresponding Bronto. So that really only applies to Ice and Life. Every other school gets 6 or more. But you get the general idea. It's like that general thing. It's like putting more damage into packs was a questionable choice. And it's one that I'm sure the devs regret. But it's what happened, and taking them out now would cause like a huge uproar. It's like a bait and switch. So they can't really take it back. But what they can do is they can add jewels, a new kind of jewel to mounts. And they can retroactively apply this to as many mounts in the game as they see fit. Maybe not things like the Enchanted Broom or any of the temporary versions of mounts, but permanent mounts and things like... I should really go to Calco's Coppersmith in Aquila to show you all this, but it's like, I think a good way to start pushing these, if they were to add them, would be to add heart sockets to the mounts that you can craft from Calco's Coppersmith over here in the Garden of Disparities. These are the Whirlwinds. And I have the Ice Whirlwind. I crafted one of these one time, and as you can see, this is not cheap to make, but you can get it for free. Ice Cuda, I guess those are kind of common, but Ultra Snow Apples, Mode of Transport, things like Aether, and I mean, obviously, you know, Balefrost DCs, it's like those cost some gold. So there are things that, you know, could maybe cost a little bit, and make it justifiable, I guess, to add sockets to these. And when I say sockets, I'm talking about marginal stat buffs. I'm not talking about, like, you know, giving as much damage as like a pet might, or giving any resist, which mounts, if this gets added, they shouldn't give resist at all on those heart sockets, just because there's already plenty of resist in the game. We don't need any more. And that's what people would go for over any other stat in PvP. So, how about it? Just don't add resist to these. If any dev ever watches this, I hope they do, because this is an idea that I think could make mounts less pay to win. And it's like, already as it stands with the damage cap, you don't need a damage mount, or at least a Gulcher, or a Bronto, or none of that to get the most damage. But, well, I say the most damage, but you could probably get some extra pierce if you were running the Bronto combo. I did have a guy comment on one of my recent videos, I think it was the Max Storm setup, the best Max Storm setup, where they said, you know, you can get max damage and 60 pierce if you run a Bronto. And that was a little mental, given that I think it's 54 pierce that I have on that setup, when I'm using completely free-to-play stuff, so... yeah, I do think that phasing that sort of thing out, or at least evening the gap, would be beneficial to the game. So I'm thinking, you know, add heart sockets, and I said this in my video from a year ago too. I said add heart sockets to give maybe up to, let's go with like 5% school-specific damage. That's not a super important stat, especially when you can get 200. So it's like an extra 5% damage on a mount. That's kind of marginal. And then things like, I don't know, maybe 2% extra pierce. I feel like there's already plenty of pierce, so adding any more might not be the wave. Basically, just make it, with the exception of damage, I would say make it on par with existing stat mounts. I would say maybe 3% pip chance at the maximum, which matches the rock. Stuff like 2% universal accuracy, although I honestly wouldn't mind having some school-specific accuracy jewels that gave a little bit more. I think having, like, I don't know, I would sock it a 3% fire accuracy jewel and call it there. I wouldn't even use the crystal unicorn. I might try and see if I couldn't figure out some way to get some more resist and then work from there. But yeah, I mean, it's just minor stuff like, you know, 3% extra accuracy, 5% extra damage, 2% extra pierce, maybe 2% outgoing healing, provided the Mammoth Mini doesn't start dropping from my neck again. And just, it's like I've been saying, you know, it's like little things that don't really count for too much, but things that sort of make that whole stats on mounts thing free. I think that is something that a lot of players want. It's like, I know a lot of people that don't have the Clockwork Courser. It is from a retired bundle, and the Vulpin Avenger is from another retired bundle, so there's no way to get a 2% Pierce mount at the moment, except for when those promotions roll around, which they only do like maybe once or twice a year. So yeah, I think adding something that can be farmed and obtained, like obtained above anything else year-round, I think that should take some precedence, and I think that should stick out in the developers' minds as something that they want to do. And I think that's, I personally, not to do my own horn, but I think it's a good idea to add some equivalent jewel sockets for mounts and not go too overboard on them. It's like that's kind of the big thing with mounts. It's like stat mounts in the first place were a mistake, and I think the devs have said that. They've gone on record and said that. It's like they regret adding stat mounts, but they have, and that's Pandora's box that they can't close. So the best that they can do is sort of mitigate the damage that they've already done with that, and just make free alternatives that can be farmed, maybe crafted. I know Selenopolis is coming out relatively soon, and I think that it could be a very, very, very good addition to Selenopolis and that update as a whole if they were to add hard sockets to mounts. I haven't really seen them talk too much. It's like I said at the beginning, there hasn't been much discussion on this since I made that video. And even then, it wasn't because of me that there was any discussion back then, because I was like 200 subs at that point. But yeah, you get the general gist of things. There should be talk about adding jewel sockets to mounts. Mount stitching as a whole, I think, is a decent idea, because, you know, you would at least be able to use, like, I don't know, an Ice Whirlwind with a Clockwork Courser stats and have that be cool. But ultimately, you would need to get the Clockwork Courser to stitch it, and that, I think, is where jewel sockets and the hard sockets take the advantage in terms of how good it is. I'm word salading. Great. But yeah, I can't really put it too great. Other than that, it's like mount stitching would be cool, but you would still have to get it in order. You would still have to get the mounts that gave stats in order to stitch them. So that's just how I see things. I think adding jewel sockets is the wave with that. So let me know y'all's thoughts down in the comments below. It felt good to talk about this again, and I do hope that it puts this on the devs' radar. I know we're a little close to the update. Test run could come as soon as this week or next, so who knows? Maybe they'll see it. Maybe they'll think about adding it to test run. They might float it and try and work out a system, but we'll really just have to see. But for now, thank y'all for watching. I've been Ice Gold. Be sure to like, subscribe, and leave 50 comments for the algorithm. My Discord is down in the description if you want to chat with me some more, and I will see y'all